Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Good, good. And we've got Sonny Loman joining us again. Thanks, Sonny. And you appear to have a furry friend with you.
Yeah, this is Pierre.
We
Hi,
had
He's
a
Pierre.
French
French.
poodle named Pierre as well when I was growing
My,
up.
my husband says he's French because he goes wee wee everywhere. Some
Very
people get it,
nice.
some people don't.
No, it's very, it's great.
Hey,
Well, this is probably a slightly more somber episode than usual. Since our last show, we had the assassination of Charlie Kirk and reaction to it. And obviously, we were talking about different show topics. And obviously, we wanted to talk about this and go through it and even, what Charlie meant to the movement and to either conservative liberty movement, just America, and even some of the objectivist reaction, good and bad. So we'll get into that.
yeah, I just want to start by giving some facts, just general facts, so that people know what we're talking about in case they're listening years from now. So Charlie Kirk was assassinated on September 10th in Utah at Utah Valley University. And they caught what they think is the killer, Tyler Robinson, I think. And then just yesterday, they had the memorial at Arizona, and it was in a big stadium with a lot of people attending. They had Christian music, and then they had speeches from a lot of different people, including Charlie's friends at Turning Point USA and his wife, and a lot of politicians, Marco Rubio, and even Donald Trump spoke at the end. So it was a very troubling last 10 days or so. And, it really hit me very hard because I've watched Charlie Kirk. I'm interested in these conservatives who go to college campuses and speak to students because that's something that, when I was a college student, um, some objectivists came to my campus and spoke, and they got heckled, by the postmodernists there. And so I'm very familiar with what happens at these events. And you got to just admire someone like Charlie Kirk who stood, in the arena of ideas and debated these people. And he was very much for free speech and for letting the opposition talk and then debating them, trying to hash out differences through dialogue. And this is what he died for. He died for, civilization. Civilization is, not using force, not resorting to violence, and being civil with people. And the person who gunned him down is for violence. And it looks like he happens to be a leftist Antifa type. So it's very sad, and I hope we can bring some clarity to this issue during this episode.
Yeah, I think I really admired him. Um, I think that his main thing was bringing debate and free speech back to the universities because prior to him being prior to his organization being popular and much bigger, um, speakers have been canceled on campuses. They've been threatened. People protest. There are all these huge crowds. Conservative students are harassed and chased out of the area. I mean, if you're a conservative student today, forget that, if you're a libertarian, I mean, if you're anything but a hardcore fringe woke leftist, you cannot espouse a single idea outside of that very particular, I don't know what you call it. It's not even an ideology. It's like a religion. Then you are called names, you're ostracized and everything else. So if you're a student today in college, having just a club of like-minded people where you feel like you're kind of winning and you feel like you're not the losers on campus or the oppressed people on campus. But so he would go into these environments and have these events that were attended by a lot of people where he actually to speak to him, which I think that in itself is kind of incredible that people were willing to go up to the microphone and debate him honestly, you know? And there was a real benevolent exchange where both sides of people were actually talking to one another. And we just don't see that anymore at all. We don't see it on podcasts. We don't see it on, because leftists will not go on podcasts that aren't friendly. And so it really was kind of incredible.
Yeah, and that may play at least some role in why he was targeted. You know, for me, when I got red pilled, it was probably 10 years ago, and it was kind of over this very issue of just the, being vilified as a racist and a bigot and a fascist. And it's just like, you people with, I was trying to tell these lefties at the time, you doing this is ginning up hate. And it's just creating an environment where people are going to think they're supposed to kill the fascist. Punch a fascist was like a popular saying a couple of years ago. And it was their way of kind of normalizing violence. And, what we saw with the George Floyd riots, and even we've seen this spate of trans shooters or trans-aligned shooters. And, I just, I'm glad we did our last episode on grudges and spite for context, but I'm angry, and I think that this should turn into something positive, but I also think it shouldn't just be kumbaya, just kind of, oh, let's all get along. I mean, these people were out there, varying degrees of not just the outright kind of justifying it, but also this kind of, well, he was saying some racist things, or he was saying these other things, and qualifying it that has the implication that, he had it coming because he was like for, Second Amendment rights. And
literally, that's the argument. If you are for the Second Amendment of the United States, if you like our Constitution, you have it coming. That's what the left was saying last week, this week. I saw that from so many normie Democrats. And this is, I don't want to say that the Second Amendment is a mainstream view, but if that's what it's come down to, that it's literally the American system or we're going to shoot you. If you want the American system, we have the right to shoot you. Well, if that's where they're at, then it's nice to know that.
It's part, I know I'm very much pro-Israel, and it was very similar on October 7th. It was the event, and then it was the reaction to the event, mostly from the left, of people that were cheering it to varying degrees, and it's Mangione as well. But going back to this racism thing, some people were quoting from Charlie himself on why gun ownership is worth a few deaths, is what they quoted him as saying. But William actually got the longer clip with the full context. And let's play that to show that, it wasn't just him saying, gun ownership's worth a few deaths.
Tend to get tyrannical, and that if people need an ability to protect themselves and their communities and their families. Now, we must also be real. We must be honest with the population. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. Wow. And that is part of liberty. Wow. Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year. Wow. That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities. But we have decided that the benefit of driving, speed, accessibility, mobility, having products, services, is worth the cost of 50,000 people dying on the road. Wow. So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen.
Right.
You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home,
Yes.
by having more armed guards in front of schools. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational.
Yeah, so the last part of that is what people were cutting out, taking out of context, and the implication is that he got what he deserved, or he was okay with people using guns to commit crimes as long as we have the right to keep our guns. But that wasn't the full context of what he was saying. He was trying to make an argument that this is we have these rights, right to drive around, right to own guns. And with that comes the reality that there are evil people out there who are going to use them for evil, for bad. And so in order to protect, our rights, you have to accept that there's going to be people who commit crimes using the tools that we use for good things like cars and guns. So he tries to make a cost benefit, sort of an economical argument for guns. But as an objectivist, we'd probably go to the moral level and we'd say, these are based on your moral, your right to life. And what's morally good for you is to own a car and use it responsibly, and to have a gun and use it responsibly, because you need a gun for protection or hunting or whatever. So unfortunately, there are evil people out there, who are going to cause mischief. And, it's our job to stop that, protect ourselves from those evil people, not to ban everything that we think could be used as a weapon.
Well, Rand spoke about life entailing risk, and that's part of that. They said crime was down during COVID when we were all locked down. Does that mean we should all, lock down forever? That there are trade-offs, and it's like, so yeah, Rand said life entails risk. Does that mean she was asking to get shot too?
There's also the broken window fallacy of, well, you can see this gun death, but do you see the death of the person who's killed by a robber who didn't have a gun? They don't ever talk about the cost to the individual person, or the death if we get a dictatorship because we're disarmed, the cost to human life. Literally, if we're doing a 1-to-1, I would rather have guns. So it's, if to your point, it comes down to, we have a right to self-defense, a fundamental right, a fundamental moral right to that. But also the cost, they never consider the cost of not being armed in the same way as they count the deaths of and it's much easier because you see a person die from a gun and you don't see what would happen if that wasn't there, which is the whole broken window fallacy argument.
Lives saved, exactly.
Let me interject. Right. So also there's the problem of banning guns from schools or campuses, and then you get the epidemic of school shootings. Because if you ban something, then criminals are going to be the only ones that have it. It's not like you're not going to have guns anymore. Guns are a thing. They've been a thing for thousands of years now. So, I don't know when they were invented, like in China or something a long time ago. So you've had guns for a long time. And people, even where guns are banned, they have knives and, machetes. So you need to be able to protect yourselves. And so when you ban something, only, the sheep will stop using it. The criminals will then slaughter the sheep. So it doesn't make sense at any level, the economic level, the moral level, just the physical reality. And one thing I liked about Kirk's answer is he started with saying, let's be real, let's be honest, let's get to what's really going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So his orientation in life, even though he was a Christian, it was to look at the facts, look at reality, what's going on. And I like how he addressed that, that was his basic level of argumentation.
Absolutely. Well, another smear about Charlie was that he was anti-gay, and I found this clip of him actually debating against an anti-gay person who questions Charlie's Christianity because he's too gay-friendly for the questioner.
I'm going to ask a very respectful question, as respectfully as I can. What does what they do in their private life concern you so much that you have to go up in front of a crowd? And
it is against God. That is
so. Let
why.
me ask
Are
you
you
a
a
question.
Christian or not?
Do we live in a theocracy? Yes or no? No. Do we live in a theocracy?
You said you're a Christian.
I am a Christian. And do you know what? And guess what? I will say this. Part of being a Christian is appropriately interpreting what the theological says for the individual, but also means to be long-suffering and patient and loving and kind. Jesus Christ talked to all people. Jesus Christ went and did his ministry through Judea and Samaria, and he had dinner with tax collectors, and he had dinner with prostitutes, and he did his ministry in every part of the Mediterranean. What it means to be a Christian, my friend, is to be open-minded but firm in your beliefs, so you can have that belief. But if you say there's something inherently wrong with communicating or associating just because they make different personal decisions than you, sir, are not a conservative. Thanks for being here tonight.
I think this goes to something that you heard in the memorial yesterday, is that Charlie Kirk was known for having grace, which can be a Christian concept, meaning like a
Class.
favoring someone, with sometimes it's like an unmerited goodwill, but I looked in the dictionary and it just says courteous goodwill. I think that's sort of like the secular form of grace that everyone can embrace.
Benevolence.
So you just, benevolence, goodwill, being courteous. And so he applies that to Jesus's ministry and says, that Jesus went around, he talked to prostitutes and tax collectors. And so he's appealing to the better side of Jesus, who had this grace and this respect for individuals and people and would listen to them. I think that's something that Charlie Kirk excelled at. And you saw that in his college campus tours.
He not only said that, he acted that way. He acted that way toward people.
And I think this is the best example of a Christian, because that's the type of Christian we want to embrace, right? Someone who will look at an atheist and say, let's talk, let's hash it out. We disagree on some fundamentals, but, I have goodwill towards you and I respect what you're saying. So let's debate. I like that type of Christian. And when they come to my door, sometimes, you get these Christian missionaries who come to your door, and I always talk to them. And we both have pleasant exchanges. So it doesn't always work out. They usually don't return after a few times, but, at least we're talking. And I think that was Kirk's message, is that even though the Bible says some nasty things about gay people, Christians are it's a turning point in the history of Christianity, and they're now embracing at least dialogue with gays and like taking them as friends and trying to minister to them. They want to talk to you. They want to spread their Christianity to anybody who will listen. That's why they go to prisons and talk to criminals.
And I
So
think
even
those philosophies are, to your point, William, that you can kind of be a good Christian or a bad Christian in the way, even the two of them going at it. And you can be a good or a bad objectivist. It's not a guarantee about your character just on what philosophy you pay lip service to. There's character that's deeper than that. And that's why it's wrong for objectivists and others in the liberty movement to be like, oh, Christians can't be for liberty, or no one religious can be for liberty. It's just.
I think this is definitely one character trait we can pick up from Charlie Kirk and other Christians who have this sort of grace. Many objectivists lack a sort of respect for the individual, and they display it by jumping to the idea that if they disagree with you at a fundamental level, then they're dishonest or, evader. So objectivists have these slurs or these smear words that they sling around, which are basically meaningless, but they use them to say, I don't really want to talk to this guy. It's a way to push them away. And I think that's what you're
By the way, Christian itself is a slur. I mean, within objectivism. Oh, he's Christian? Then nothing he says is worth listening to, because he's just irrational, mystical, like this. And I think Yaron said something like, he's the enemy because he's Christian. And so that in itself is a slur that people use. But I agree with you, William. I think that is a trait I admired about him, that he could be so calm and so, I think I heard somebody express it like he respected the individual and their mind, and that a person has to be persuaded. And that just because you say something brilliant doesn't mean they're going to be instantly persuaded either, but that you have to over and over be out there talking about your ideas and trying to, over time, convince people. And we don't see that kind of among objectivist leadership. I don't think we see that kind of grace, as you called it. And I might add too, grace is a specific concept taught in Montessori.
I didn't know that.
To children, to learn how to get along with people. And so.
Well, the last clip on Charlie that we have, William came up with this one, and it goes back to the theology issue, and whether some people have accused him of wanting a theocracy or no separation of church and state. And here's how he answers that.
Hope you're doing well. So my question was about separation of church and state. So I know I did some research. I've researched your positions. I know you've come out and said you don't believe in the separation of church and state. And I'd like to ask you why, even though there's the non-establishment clause, freedom of religion, and then there's, lawsuits in the, historically, like Anglo versus Vital, that come out to say that church and state should be separated.
It's a fair question. So I don't believe in a national church. Okay. More importantly, let's forget church and state. Okay. Can we both agree there's no separation between morality and state?
I agree.
Okay.
It's just lawmaking.
That's cool. That's where I really live in. What I'm saying, though, is the church should influence that morality. That's what I mean by that. Because at some point, people are going to have to make a decision of what is good and what is bad, what is permissible and not permissible. And I think the church or Christianity should inform those decisions.
I've seen clips of him talking about different issues where he rides that line just perfectly. I saw a clip of him talking about abortion, and the woman's like, well, you're just going to say it's the Bible, which a lot of Christians do, which is a mistake on their part, because you're talking to people that don't read, don't understand, don't care about the Bible. So that's not going to convince anybody. And he was very good at kind of not abandoning his religion, but not using it to answer every question. So he would say, and kind of like objectivists, we have this philosophy. It informs our morality, which informs our politics. And he was able to, I wouldn't even call it a compartmentalization. I would say he had a morality based on a metaphysics that maybe we don't agree with, but he had a morality, and that informed his politics. But his politics was sort of a separate thing. And, the clip I'm thinking of specifically, he was talking about abortion, which a lot of times Christians will just kind of yell at you and just call you names if you're talking to them about abortion. And he said, the girl was saying, you're just going to blame it, you're just going to say Bible. And he said, no, I have a totally secular defense of my position on abortion. So, and then he went through it. And Anyway, I don't want to like just be playing defense about Charlie, but I think we are trying to sort of debunk some of the more outrageous, nasty slurs against him. He was actually a person of very high moral character in our own philosophy that is, you know, of objectivism. So
I
it's
don't
a
need
shame.
someone to share my metaphysics if they share my morality, even if there may be, I think there are inconsistent ways they got there. I mean, you know, if it's like live and let live, we can use that as at least a basis to start. And
You know that that clip we showed was titled "The Myth of Church and State." So, and then in the question, the questioner said, I know you don't believe in the church separation of church and state. And Charlie Kirk was this is an example of his grace. He was like, he kind of like shook his head a little bit and thought about, you know, his position, but he didn't interrupt the questioner. He just let the questioner finish the question. So, and then when the guy was finished, then he said, well, I'm not for a national church, which would be theocracy, right? So he's making clear that whatever his video title is, or, you know, whatever other people think, he's not for theocracy. He doesn't want a national church, but he does want the church to influence the morality, whatever morality the state embraces. Which you could say that about
our morality to influence how politics.
Yeah, that's just a natural thing. So it's really unclear what, you know, what his issue is with church and state, because he's saying in essence he's saying he is for the separation of church and state, because the Establishment Clause is saying that the government won't make laws respecting, you know, a church or an establishment of religion. So it seems like he agrees with that. He doesn't want a national church. But on the other hand, he has this nuanced opinion of, you know, the separation of morality and state and how the church would affect that. So I think as objectivists, we can sympathize with that, because, of course, we want objectivism, you know, selfishness or egoism to influence what's going on in government, influence the laws, and we try to influence Congress people and the president. And of course, the president is influenced by church leaders. Like Billy Graham was famous for talking to every president. So basically, I think he's making a grounded, objective point: is that, you know, as a moral institution, the church should be trying to influence the state. It's just we have a disagreement about the morality.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not even the morality doesn't necessarily even have to be that different. There can be shared values, at least broadly, even if we disagree on, you know, policies or laws. But I do want to spend at least a little time getting into some of the objectivist reaction to the shooting, good or bad. I know there was a comment from Michael Hurd. I can read that, or I didn't know if you wanted to read it, William, since which one of you
I don't have
that?
it.
Okay.
You can go ahead and read it. Yeah.
Okay. Why did the left, and it was the left, not just one sociopath, kill Charlie Kirk? He was reasonable. He gave people a chance to debate him. He was kind and fair. Reason, not polemics, was his methodology. He belonged more to ancient Greece, the domain of Aristotle, than to our cruel, adversarial, cynical, hard culture of today. Don't you understand? It was precisely because of his most virtuous qualities that Charlie Kirk had to go. From the leftist, utterly psychotic, totalitarian perspective that still rules our time. If Charlie Kirk didn't have so much to offer, especially to young people who might have been considering an alternative to the brazen insanity, intellectual dishonesty, and open evil surrounding them, then it would not have been necessary to kill Charlie Kirk in cold blood with all the world watching. You must understand just how evil the established viewpoint and attitudes of our era really are. Leftism is more ruthlessly and morally hollow than anything yet served up to humankind, including Nazism, Stalinism, and all the rest. Consider yourself warned by the leftists themselves. One more time. Close quote.
It's terrifying.
Well, yeah. I think that he's pointing out, you know, one of the main issues here is that this assassination is more than just some 20-something-year-old killing, a free speech advocate on a college campus. It's about what ideologies are clashing here. You've got the left, which is terrible and anti-civilization, anti-reason, anti-individualism, anti-capitalism. And then you had someone like Charlie Kirk, who was a product of Western civilization, and on several occasions said directly that he was fighting for Western civilization. He was trying to save it. So he is a hero now, and he's become martyred. They martyred him, and he's going to become a cause now. So someone's going to be. He's already got all those people at Turning Point, standing up and saying, "We are Charlie Kirk." And I think a lot more people are going to be thinking that, because in essence, we are, all of us who admire Western civilization are standing for it and fighting for it, speaking out against leftist socialism and communism and this postmodern woke bullshit. We're all Charlie Kirk now in that sense.
Yeah.
I want to speak to too. I think that he's obviously, yes, he's inspired a political, I don't even know what to call it. I mean, from the people on the right, like even myself, I'm already upset about them. I already understand the left. I'm already kind of doing somewhat what I can. But then that happened, it really affected me. Like it's made me really want to be even more bold and more busy with whatever that was that I was already doing and do more. And also the celebrating after was a huge wake-up call for me. And I don't want to deal with any of them. Like it's made me, and that's really not like Charlie Kirk at all. But I think what I mean is I'm not going to tolerate it anymore. I'm not going to just keep my mouth shut to be nice or tolerate people educating my daughter or, I'm looking for a new place for her to go to school because I know that there's too many leftists there. And I'm like this close to putting her in like a full-blown Christian school. And I want to say to Objectivists, because I think like what we're also seeing is a lot of people going to church now in the last week and inspired by Charlie Kirk. And I had been seeing that already building on the right. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but
Ayn Rand became Christian.
Yeah, but like a lot of atheists even taking their families to church. And I don't think that it's anything to be afraid of. I know that kind of goes against Dim, but I think this is people wanting Western civilization. I don't think this is people wanting anything irrational. I think they're going there to meet up with their fellow humans that still want decency and music and beauty and life and children and family and humanity. It's like that is the reason for it. It's the culture at large has gotten so degraded, so disgusting, like overtly disgusting. Having a little girl right now, oh my God. I mean, trying to keep her from, and boys too, like the whole porn problem and the internet has just created this and social media. And I think it's a positive thing that people are looking for order, beauty, community with fellow Americans who don't, and Europeans who don't want to have their families descend and just buy into this postmodernist, degeneracy and despair. I mean, that's the other thing. These people are despairing. The guy who shot Charlie Kirk and his circle of Antifa freaks, they are to be pitied. I mean, they are really, you don't want to have your kids exposed to that, or, to have it. Like, this boy comes out of a conservative family, and he was just
That's how he
online.
got the gun training.
He was online a lot, and he got sucked into the porn, furry, gay thing going on online. That sucks in a lot of girls, more than boys usually. And so I don't think people should be afraid of it. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think it's a positive thing.
No, I have no issue with using a church for community. I remember a TV show where there was a christening and like the atheist didn't want to go. And it's like, if you don't believe, they're just sprinkling some water on them. And
I think
so
it depends on the church. There's all kinds of different churches. Christianity has segmented into so many different variations that I think there are better ones that you can choose and maybe get some benefit
There
out
are
of.
even
But
woke churches.
yeah,
yeah, so you just like objectivists are splintering into different factions. You got to be careful which Christian church you go to, because some are just gonna brainwash you even more to the left. And there are leftist churches. So, but if you find
And
a nice traditional one,
there are creepy cult right-wing churches too. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't exist.
exactly. But it's like Charlie can be a good Christian, and he was debating with a bad Christian. There are good ones and bad ones, and that applies to the churches as well. I do want to spend just a little bit more time on objectivist reaction. Jennifer Grossman, CEO of the Atlas Society, she actually worked with Charlie. She says, as a member of their advisory council, I was proud to see them grow from an organization from a couple of hundred students to crowds of several thousand. As an objectivist organization, the Atlas Society certainly diverged from the more populist conservatism embraced by Turning Point, and yet we remained partners over the years on projects. Charlie described himself as a huge fan of Ayn Rand and shared our mission of introducing young people to the literature and philosophy that promotes the moral foundations of the free market. So, she still got in that kind of, even though we diverged, that still, I give her credit, because it wasn't that kind of, negative, I'm hedging. It's just saying we're not populist, yet we were still able to work together. That's different from what you were hearing by these people that always had to qualify, any kind of liking of what he had to say. And then I along those lines, Razi and James Valliant, Razi Ginzberg of the Ayn Rand Center UK, they talked about the issue. And I want to talk about, this is good because they actually admonish people for making qualifying statements about Charlie.
We were today doing a show about the assassination of Rachel Maddow or anybody anywhere on the political spectrum, any commentator. There's no way I would start with, look, I'm against this and that policy that this person advocated for. No, I'm against murder. Okay, so let's start with that. If you're against murder, you don't have to hedge. Just be against murder. That's a strong statement. Make that statement. And if anybody thinks that by saying by you saying I'm against this act of murder, that means you agree with everything Charlie Kirk says. First of all, nobody actually thinks that. If anybody says that to you, they're attempting to move the conversation in a certain direction. There is no need to qualify your opposition to murder, to political murder.
So yeah, I'm very pleased that Razi agrees with this point, which I've been making about disclaimers and qualifying statements about people you disagree with on something, but want to express support in some other area. So I think you should not be afraid of being misassociated with someone just because you're just like, and this happens a lot when you say good things about Donald Trump. People think, oh, he's just a Trump sycophant. But you shouldn't be afraid of people who will think that, because they're idiots. They're not important. They don't think clearly, and they're not going to make a difference. What makes a difference is when you give your point in a clear and concise way without qualifying it, so that people remember your point and will recall that, yes, this is a good thing about Donald Trump, or this is a good thing about Charlie Kirk. These are admirable qualities about them. And you don't worry about whether other people are going to think about you and your associations. Have some self-confidence, some self-esteem in your own ability to argue with people who might come up to you and say, well, do you believe everything Trump says or everything Kirk says? Wait until they make that argument and then address it.
That is such a good point. And anyone who is doing that, like pandering to the kind of mentality that can't think about your point and is all wrapped up in ad hominem and guilt by association, and that, to me, that is a form of political correctness, like absorbed into your soul, that you feel like you have to, I'm not on the bad guy team just because I agree with this one thing. Like, it's so weak, and it buys into the leftist zeitgeist that we have been living under for 2 decades. And I'm old enough to remember when people did not do that. And it's bad. Like, prior to this whole thing, it's something that people have been doing. And it's been bothering me for a long time, as I think you too, William, right? You've been making that point. But yeah, it's horrible. It's weak.
Yeah, it's a kind of, I think you bring up a good point. It's kind of a sanction of like the leftist lording over us, that you feel like you have to start off before they even ask for it.
Yeah, it's beta. It's like accepting that they create the moral framework, and we are just operating within their moral framework. And it is an embrace of logical fallacies too that they like to push. And yeah, but I want to say one thing about what he said, because I'm conflicted about that. I'm not really conflicted about this. If you believe that we are living in a dictatorship, and that at any moment you're going to be snatched off the street and sent to a gulag or sent to El Salvador, and that is really what's happening, is it really bad to take action on that, to revolt, to try to trigger a revolution? It's not. And so I don't think arguing in that way, like, oh, I'm just against murder. What I'm against is the relentless lying and slurring and propaganda against decent Americans, decent everyday Americans, by the people who are really literally projecting their own shitty character onto normal, decent people who just want to live in a safe, reasonable environment and be more or less left alone by the government.
So Razi was making the point about being against murder, but it's also, people are saying that they're against Kirk's ideas. And I don't know if we're going to play the Yaron clips about this, but Yaron was very bad on this point about really attacking Kirk for his ideas. And so it's a little harder. It's easy to say I'm against murder. It's a little harder in the face of Kirk's assassination to say, I agree with something Kirk said, or I agree with Kirk's crusade for free speech and debate. And the idea that when you stop talking, that's when violence happens. That was, something that he stood for, that Kirk stood for. And so if it's harder to do that, say you support him in that area and then not say something negative, especially if you lack self-confidence in your own positions and you're worried about what other people are going to think about you. It's very hard not to do these disclaimers and qualifying statements. And so that's one thing I admired about Jag at the Atlas Society. She went on video, live video or something. She did like I don't know what she was doing, but I saw a video of her on the day that Charlie Kirk was shot. She came on video and gave a very touching talk, some statements about Charlie Kirk, and none of it was negative. She talked about how he was a close friend of the Atlas Society, and they taught Atlas Shrugged to their students, and JAG was involved in that. The Atlas Society was involved in that. She spoke at their events, she said, and she also said that Kirk read Atlas Shrugged, and that was like his first awakening to liberty, and the ideas of Ayn Rand. So it's really troubling that we have some objectivists at the top level who can't stop themselves from just shitting on Charlie Kirk and making him out as if he's this great enemy of our movement.
Well, so many of them are, they have this kind of, I don't want to be misrepresented as a conservative. And so that's part of what leads them to, feel like they need to virtue signal to the Democrats that they're not. But
why? What's so bad about conservatives? I mean, these are the best people in America right now.
When the left was in control of the culture, it was the safer move.
Well, that's just it. I think it's like, what is it exactly? It's wanting to be invited to the cocktail parties. Like, is it? And yet they're not invited to the cocktail parties. It's like a cringing sort of, maybe one day I'll be invited to the cocktail parties kind of thing.
I keep saying I'm not a conservative enough, but to your question, to William, I do have a clip of Yaron, and this is from right after Charlie was shot. He was doing his show.
I hope that he is going to survive this. You all know I'm a huge Charlie Kirk a critic, but I also know Charlie Kirk personally and knew him when he was much younger and have followed his career. Admire much of what he's done in the sense of his ambition and the scope of what he's achieved. I'm very critical of him in terms of his ideas, in terms of his philosophy, and in terms of the direction he's taken. But the idea that somebody gets shot over their ideas in the United States of America, well, it's happened before, and we've lived through it before. Seeing it happen now, here, today, is super scary.
It's just awful, the way he talks about Charlie Kirk right immediately after
he found out that he died. Because I think there was another clip of him finding out that he'd been shot.
Next clip.
And then that was the clip of him right after he found out that he had indeed died. And he can't help himself.
Yaron was literally, just before we started this clip, if you go and watch that whole episode, literally right before, he was describing how Charlie Kirk was shot and blood was spurting out of his neck. And then he launches into this, oh, by the way, I'm a huge critic. It's just grotesque. I use that word a lot, grotesque, because I can't find a better word to describe this attitude, of just switching from describing the most awful thing we've seen in a long time. And then, oh, by the way, here's a whole litany. He must have gone to the synonym book to look up all the words for I dislike this person. Because he goes on in that episode to just describe all the negative things he doesn't like about Charlie Kirk and repeats himself basically over and over and calls him an enemy. He's a cultural enemy.
He literally called him an enemy. This is a guy going onto campuses where the hardcore communist, postmodernist, where literally the root of the enemy, the true enemy of any freedom and any goodness is at the universities. And this Charlie went there.
I used to be at universities, but they kind of gave them up when it got too tough, presumably. But let's go to this next clip, Sonny, that you mentioned. This is the next one. where he does announce Charlie's death.
Anyway, it does look like, unless this is fake news, but I don't think so, that Charlie Kirk has passed away, which, again, while a rival, somebody I disagreed with, somebody I opposed, somebody in some ways I feared because I thought he would gain a lot of political power in the future, this is not the way to resolve. This is not the way to resolve disputes.
Unbelievable. Just so he says in one breath, he says, Charlie has passed away. He's my rival. It's so ridiculous. Like,
rival implies they were on the same level. I mean, he wasn't in Charlie's ballpark.
But my God, like, you're talking about someone you knew personally and just died a horrible...
Since he was a boy. He says, I knew him since he was 17. A boy.
Yeah. And he's just died a horrible public death, assassination. And here you are, you do a whole paragraph on how... I mean, did you see the movie The Dead Zone, where the guy can see the future and he sees the political candidate who's going to become this dictator president, and so he shoots him to prevent... It's kind of like a shooting Hitler as a baby scenario. He's describing that. He's saying, look, I thought Charlie Kirk would gain a lot of political power, and he feared this. Like, he feared Charlie Kirk gaining a lot of political power in the future. So that's like, okay, assassin, here's your motive for shooting him, because in the future he's going to gain all this political power, and he's our enemy. You know, so Yaron believes in he doesn't believe in the method, but he does believe in the motive. So he agrees. Charlie Kirk was a bad guy. Charlie Kirk's a bad guy, and we should stop him. But then Yaron says, "Oh, but you shouldn't shoot him. You shouldn't murder him, because that's bad."
Again, it's this. I think this is the flawed argument. Well, you shouldn't punch a Nazi, but he's a Nazi. But he wasn't a Nazi. And so I think you could make a case that you could punch a Nazi. And so the case is not, oh, we shouldn't punch Nazis, which is actually in a system like ours, we shouldn't punch Nazis. But regardless, like, if things were to get really bad, you have a right to revolution. And so that's not really an argument. The argument is that this was a good person. This was a good person who did not deserve to be shot, and in no circumstances.
Well, I'm glad I can't see into Yaron's mind, because I'd probably just vomit. I'm glad we saved these to the end, because I'm feeling a little sick.
Well, in this next clip from the next day, I don't know if the scholars at a powwow or something, but they decided that Charlie's death was largely a free speech issue.
We accepted violence, and we've accepted that really both sides, and I know it's boathism, but whereas the left has led on the issue of free speech, the right has embraced rejection of free speech. And, you know, Charlie yesterday lost his life exactly for that, for his speech. It was not tolerated by certain people, or by a person. And therefore it ended, and people are celebrating his death because they couldn't handle the fact that somebody spoke. And a lot of what Charlie said was wrong. A lot of what Charlie said was offensive. Really offensive. And really wrong. And that doesn't change the fact that he had a right to say it.
Things that Charlie said were offensive if you hate America. Like, that's... So what is he talking about?
You know what's offensive is saying that the left led on free speech. What the hell is he talking about?
I think he was saying on free speech restrictions. Maybe.
No, he said the left was led on free speech, and the right has led on restricting free speech.
I thought he was saying the left got bad and the right got worse.
I don't think so.
The 1980s called, and they want their political analysis back.
It sounds like he's very confused about who the left is versus like just liberals, like free speech liberals, because liberals are not leftists. And, at least the old school liberals, I mean, I don't even know like if we have any real liberals left anymore. They've all moved right. They've all become semi-conservative or Republicans. So
Right.
like Dave Rubin, they're not, they don't want to be associated with anything leftist. So, they don't want to be called these liberals anymore because leftists are trying to look like liberals. They're trying to take over the Democratic Party. So I don't know what Yaron's talking about. I don't even know if he knows what he's talking about. After he said that, did you notice him pause? Kind of like, is that bullshit or what? And I don't know if he recognized that it didn't make sense, but he didn't take it back or anything. So,
but I think I've seen other ARI people talk about it, and they're turning it into this free speech issue. And to me, it's not. I mean, he happened to be someone who was an advocate for speech and spoke. And I mean, yes, to the extent anyone gets killed, you could say it's taking out their free speech rights. But I mean, it wasn't just about that. He was targeted for being an effective voice on the right. It wasn't, by his political opponents or at least the ones that committed the act. And I just don't, I think calling it a free speech issue is just, it just ended up being in line with like the left started making it all about free speech as well. They're like, oh, we just need to make sure everything's okay for everyone. And, we had all this FCC stuff and people got fired from their jobs, and Jimmy Kimmel's on suspension, but he may be coming back. I just,
at a very superficial level, I think it's somewhat about speech because the left thinks that speech is violence. And so they respond with violence. And Charlie Kirk was very good at talking on college campuses. So this killer, we don't know much about his motives, but if you can trust the chat that he had with his boyfriend, he was saying some hate can't be negotiated with or something like that. So I think this guy was of the mentality that it's okay to take out your enemy if you can't talk to him anymore. This guy probably felt very, very insufficient or impotent when it came to debating people. So he just took out his frustration with the gun. And, that's something that we can blame the leftist ideology for, us because they believe in revolution and, using violence to take over the government and take over culture. They don't believe in free speech. So I don't know what Yaron's talking about.
The left has also completely isolated all of these young people from any counter arguments. So they get to that age and they've never heard any of this stuff, really. They've only heard it as Charlie Kirk is evil. Charlie Kirk is a racist. They haven't heard the arguments. They haven't heard them addressed by other, honestly, by anyone on their side. They're just smeared and everything else. So I think that's part of it too, is like epistemologically, young people today are trained to just accept these ideas and they are exposed to no actual critical analysis.
Well, Jordan Peterson was criticized for not using their pronouns. So it's like they not only do they not believe in your right to speak freely, they believe in imposing speech on you. They want you to say what they want you to say. And so it's horrible that what Yaron is saying and his take on this. It's just totally off. I don't know if he's confused or what, but the left has nothing to do with free speech. They're anti-free speech, and they are the enemy of people like Charlie Kirk, and that's why he got shot.
Yeah, well, along those same lines, in this next clip, Yaron talks about Charlie taking a turn for the worst in the last 6 to 8 years.
So I was still doing Turning Point events shortly into the Trump presidency, and then it went to zero. Nada, nothing. And at some point I thought he took a turn that was very bad. He said some things that I thought were pretty disgusting and pretty awful. In terms of Jews, in terms of race, in terms of just repeating Trumpist lies, in terms of misinformation, in terms of just lying and deception. But again, you know, he had a right to do that.
Well, that's the classic objectivist smear. He's a liar and a deceiver. There we go.
It's like all they got.
You could predict it. Set this to your, set it by your watch and just, wait for it to happen.
I need a button that says that. Liar, evader.
Alarm. We should have an alarm where, oh, here he is. He's talking about lying and deceiving again. You're a dishonest scumbag.
You're on bingo.
After his brutal assassination, you're going to call this guy names without and he doesn't even bother to bring up the particulars. It's just a general smear. We're supposed to accept this.
Yeah. Why was Israel wanting to hire him if as PR if he was so anti-Jewish? I mean, I grew up Jewish. I'm pretty pro-Israel, and I just have not seen anything on Charlie that makes me think he's anti-Jewish. It's honestly what he was repeating there was like a litany of what the left wanted you to hate about him.
Well, apparently he was fine and dandy, shortly into the Trump administration, but then he suddenly becomes evil when Charlie Kirk doesn't want him at Turning Point events anymore.
Timing is quite suspicious. And also Richard Salsman and Jag, for example, Jennifer Grossman have been speaking at Turning Point events in the last couple of years. So it's not like he, hates Ayn Rand people. It's just, maybe Yaron should ask, maybe his attitude made him a little less appealing to invite when he started going off on the TDS that he doesn't think he has.
Yeah, did he go to Turning Point and tell them all how evil they are and deceivers and evaders?
Exactly. He would have been booed there. Charlie was protecting him.
This guy can't focus on a positive thing, for more than half a sentence.
Well, in this last clip along those lines, this is where he talks about continuing Charlie not being good about ideas and being an invader.
I feel terrible about Cook, but morally, I have qualms. He went fully in for Trump and MAGA, including its many ugly positions, such as an immigration, trade, and even anti-Iran strikes. Shouldn't he have known better? Yeah, he should have. Charlie was not a good guy when it comes to ideas, when it comes to advocacy. He wasn't. He was an invader. He took a bad turn. He took a turn towards bad ideas. And he took a turn because he was better when he was younger. And I think there was an element of Charlie, there was power lusting that really enjoyed the schmoozing with the Trumps, with Trump Jr., with Eric, with Trump Sr., with being a celebrity. He was a celebrity, and I think he really enjoyed that. So again, I don't want to make that the focus because he just died. But yeah, I agree with all of that. But
well, it's too late.
He has no evidence. He has no evidence that Charlie was some sort of grifter, celebrity, like shallow Kardashian type.
He was more successful than Yaron. That is all the evidence he needs.
He liked being a celebrity. Well, I hope so, because that's his job. So, you better enjoy being in the public eye if you're going to be in the public eye. It's fine. It's okay to enjoy being in the public eye. It doesn't make you a bad person. And Yaron himself wishes and asks for and begs and complains about the fact that he's not more popular.
Well, we all know that if Kirk had invited him to Turning Point last year, Yaron would be there in an instant. It doesn't matter what he thinks of people. He's the one who's the power luster. I think he's projecting this because he said that he would even though he thought evil things of Jordan Peterson or whatever, he'd jump on his podcast, and he thinks evil things of Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, and but
right.
in an instant he would go to their podcasts because he believes in just getting, clout. He's clout chaser. He wants more audience, So it sounds like he's projecting this power lusting thing.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's, and that's beyond just like even protecting yourself from the left. That's just kind of assuming the worst about someone, and just with no evidence whatsoever other than, his success. Oh, anyone more successful than me is a power luster.
Seriously, no evidence. Oh, he doesn't believe in his cause. He doesn't believe what he says. He just likes being a celebrity. What? Like, that is the opposite of what I think the evidence shows for Charlie Kirk.
Well, I do. I'm not going to play a clip, but Onkar and Nikos also talked about Charlie, and I will say they said some good things. Nikos said that, the idea that speech is violence helped cause this, and if views on trans are violence, then retaliatory violence becomes justified to them. But Richard Salsman, of all people, actually had some good comments. First, he quotes Onkar Ghate saying, we see people stoking the flames, and the flames here are any fear-mongering that you do that makes it seem like to the people listening we're under an attack, a real attack, that the only resort is to meet violence and force with violence and force. The more you activate that dishonestly in people's minds, this fear-mongering, the more you have to expect that people are going to start more and more resorting to violence. And Salsman, to his credit, brings up the great point that Onkar Ghate and his cohorts have smeared and demonized MAGA and Trump since 2016. That year, he wrote at length that Trump was leading America into dictatorship, reissued in 2022. And there's been perpetual fear-mongering since then. I don't know. And so that's what Salsman was saying. He makes a great point. It's like, I remember saying that, Yaron saying that Trump would be the end of America. It's like, yeah, there's been a lot of fear-mongering out there. So, maybe they should look in the mirror.
Well, we pointed out their hypocrisy a lot on this program. And I listened to that Onkar and Nikos thing, and there was some good things being said by Nikos, but I don't think they were focusing really on the major issues. They're kind of tap dancing around any support of Kirk or any really deep ideas about this. It's very superficial things they were saying. So I don't have much in reply to this. I do recognize their hypocrisy, and they are responsible, I think, for fear-mongering among the Trump, fear-mongering Trump and saying bad things about him, and adding to this hysteria about the Trump administration. And so they've contributed to the culture that says he's a Hitler, he's a dictator. And so if you are contributing to that idea, you're intellectually responsible for people who take that idea seriously and then act on it. You got to take some responsibility for that, especially when you're pointing out, when you're making an argument that's blatantly false, and based on misperceptions or misidentifications of reality. Okay, so I think after all these Yaron clips, we need a palate cleanser. I want to end on something positive about Charlie Kirk. So we do have a clip from Jag at the Atlas Society, and she said some really nice things about Charlie immediately after learning that he was shot. So I think we want to play that clip.
I'm Jag. I'm CEO of the Atlas Society. Before I even begin to introduce our guest, I just want to say on behalf of everyone at the Atlas Society how sickened I am and we are by the news of Charlie Kirk's attempted assassination. Charlie has been a close friend to the Atlas Society, and I've been on their advisory board since the early days and had the honor of speaking at many events. Some of you may not know that reading Atlas Shrugged was his first awakening to the ideas of liberty, and we are thinking and hoping for the best for him and for his family.
What a difference. What a difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, you just see how composed she is and how positive she's trying to stay in the face of this tragedy, and she's wishing him well and his family well, and it's just an attitude that you don't get from other objectivists. And so
It's the
I'm
most
happy.
human I've seen of the objectivists.
Yeah, and it is an element of grace, what we were talking about. It's just spreading this goodwill to other people and just having the ability to focus on that, focus on being positive and trying to say good things about someone who has just been shot.
It also has a confidence and a first-handedness, because you're not worried about whether or not someone's going to think that you agree with everything, like as we were talking about earlier. If you can just come out and be like, no, this is just wrong and bad, I have nothing else to say about it. And that he was a good person and that he did good things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you say about somebody who's just been shot. It's like, it's kind of I don't know if objectivists think that when you see somebody be so cold and so kind of nasty, that's somehow better. Like that is a very, very despicable response. I mean, we want to go positive. I want to give her credit. That shows confidence and it shows first-handedness.
Well, just to on a closing note for me, I just to be positive, I have been inspired by the reaction, not just on the right, but by independents and people who took it upon themselves to learn about Charlie and the things he said and the things that he did, and it's really mobilized a lot of people. And I see that if there is any positive, it's that they've probably sparked a whole lot of new Charlie Kirks.
I will say that right before he died, right before he was shot, we were discussing doing an episode, and I brought up the topic, and it was, I wanted to talk about capitalism and the objections to it that we're seeing in the culture right now. Legitimate objections, legitimate things people are seeing out there, or they think they're seeing that they're associating with capitalism. And I was inspired by Charlie Kirk. I don't know if I think I told you guys that. So we were having these discussions about capitalism and defending it and like against the current kind of problems that people are seeing that seem to be capitalism doing bad things. And it was Charlie Kirk on Tucker Carlson. He was interviewed by Tucker in July or something. And they were having a discussion, and Charlie was saying, listen, I'm on these campuses, I'm talking to these leftist kids, young people, and they're all saying the same thing. I don't have a future. I can't buy a house. Inflation is, all their complaints. A lot of them are economic, and they're going to end up turning to communists like this guy running for mayor in New York and AOC and that type, real leftists. Politically, if we don't do something about it. That's what he was saying. We have to do something about this. We have to go talk to these people and convince them that, okay, what you're seeing is real. We can't just deny that what they're seeing isn't happening. And so the fact that he was listening to young people, listening to their complaints, not afraid to think about it and talk about it and debate these kids, not defensive, allowed him, I think, to have a much bigger impact. And meanwhile, you have yahoos that are supposed to be the defenders of capitalism who won't even consider the different things, you know, they're so, oh, capitalism is the only moral social system. Like that's all they've got because they don't actually debate anybody.
And if they don't respond to that, they must be a dishonest debater.
So I was really excited to like actually sit down with some objectivists and talk about these things based on what I heard Charlie Kirk saying. So he was inspiring the next thing that we were going to talk about. And then he was killed. So I want to give him credit for that, because I think that is another thing that just shows what an influence he had and why.
We can still talk about it.
Well, I watched the memorial yesterday, and you know, all sorts of people talked about him, and his partner at Turning Point was saying that Charlie Kirk worked endlessly, you know, shooting ideas back and forth. He was an idea man. And that's what it takes to grow a movement, is you have to constantly be thinking and coming up with new ideas and executing them, putting them into practice, you're chewing them over. You know, so Charlie Kirk was the idea man, and I forget the guy's name, but his partner at Turning Point was the one who would turn them into proposals, you know, and then they would send them off to money people and get funding for their projects. So I think objectivists, at least at ARI, they're failing to do this. There's no real idea person there. They're not coming up with good ideas. And the ideas they're coming up with are not resonating with anybody, except maybe a few people at ARI. So I don't know, they're not expanding the movement. And one thing Razi said in his episode is that, let me get the quote, you're saying, "We have failed as a movement." That's what he said in the episode. And I think he's right on that. You know, in a certain sense, especially ARI, they've failed. They have not created the intellectual base. They don't have hardly any intellectuals to spread the message or come up with ideas. They're not persuading people. And I think one of the problems is they lack this sort of grace that Charlie Kirk had. They can't form coalitions because they're so antagonistic towards other people. They can't get along. And that's a problem. If you can't get along with these Christians who believe in loving your enemy, if you can't get along with those types of people, who are you going to get along with? You're not going to succeed in this culture. You have to recognize that Christians are a dominant force, and you have to find, and they are, in some regards, they are very much for freedom and liberty. You know, Jesus was a free speaker. Jesus died for speaking. He was put up on the cross because he was talking to people and saying things that the intellectual Jews didn't like. And he died for that. So I think Charlie Kirk is a type of martyr. He's an intellectual martyr. And, you know, we need to recognize that. And we need to recognize in our movement, you know, our failings and what we need to improve. And I think one of the big factors is we need to be better at talking to other people and getting along with other people.
Good stuff. Well, thank you both for taking the time. We talked about a lot of really good things, and we'll get the next one going here soon. I'm Scott Schiff, along with William Swig and Sonny Lohman. This is the Ayn Rand Fan Club, and we'll see you next time. Take care.